Hi, this is Teddy. Today's episode is about Oregon. Here are some facts about Oregon. The capital of Oregon is Salem, and the largest city is Portland. Oregon ranks 27th in population with just over 4 million people. The governor of Oregon is Democrat Kate Brown. The senators are Democrats Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley. Oregon sends 5 representatives to the U.S. House, 4 Democrats and 1 Republican. Bye.
Hi guys, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and today to talk about the politics of Oregon, I am here with 2 friends. I'm excited about this. So I'm here with Rebecca Cohen and Megan Cleland, and they are 2/3 of the End Times Pep Talk podcast. We have collaborated once before, and they're going to tell us all about Oregon. Hi guys.
Hi. We'll try anyway.
Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You know more about Oregon politics than I do, so thus you are experts.
Low bar.
We'll see.
All right. So can you guys talk a little bit about what it is you do besides podcasting with Oregon politics?
Sure. I'll go first. This is Rebecca. So our podcast, End Times Pep Talk, is kind of like a snarky feminist take on mostly national politics, but we touch on a lot of local issues too. But when we're not doing that, I am one of the co-founders of Indivisible Oregon, and I run the Indivisible Oregon Twitter account. And I've also been involved with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense for about 5 years, since shortly after they were founded. So that was kind of where I cut my activist chops, and that led pretty naturally into helping start the Indivisible chapter here. And then I'll turn it over to Megan.
I am Megan. And so I started with Indivisible Oregon, I think about 6 weeks after they were formed, kind of in response to the travel ban initially was what got me started. I was not involved, other than a spectator. I wasn't involved in politics. And we just started kind of like engaging with members of Congress and showing up at their offices and talking about issues. And we've been doing that for a year and a half now. Yeah. Every week we go to a senator's office. Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden are our 2 senators. And we also have Smitha, who is the third person on our podcast, is the team lead on our policy team. And they do actions 6 days a week. They post background and scripts and research Oregon specific scripts and kind of articles and stuff like that about major things that are going on, and give you the tools to kind of call your members of Congress. And we're also now gearing up for midterms, mainly in Washington 3, which is our closest swing district, other than District 2, which is a whole other thing. Trying to use some of our progressive resources, since a lot of people, especially our member of Congress, Blumenauer, is pretty safe. There's a lot of people here that are energized to do stuff, so we're trying to focus on helping other areas that maybe don't have the resources or don't have the manpower to kind of do their thing effectively.
Yeah, so Swing Left identified Washington's 3rd district as the closest swing district to Portland, the Portland metro area. It's just across the Columbia River from Portland. And their representative, Jamie Herrera-Butler, is a Republican who seems mostly concerned with saving salmon from sea lions.
That's right. She's got a thing with sea lions.
She's got a thing about sea lions. I'm not even kidding. It's ridiculous. So we're focusing on that midterm race, and then the midterm race in Oregon's 2nd district, which is basically like the 2/3 of Oregon that are east of the Cascade Mountains. It's a huge district. Yeah. It's the 6th
size of Missouri
largest area for a congressional district in the U.S. And Representative Greg Walden is the only Republican in Oregon's congressional delegation, and he represents that district.
Barely represent. Yeah, that's part of the issue.
In quotes. I'm doing air quotes, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about, for a minute, your representation. So Oregon is one of only 8 states that has a Democratic governor and Democratic state house and state senate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of people think of Oregon as sort of this really liberal, really blue, hippie place.
I know it is. Yeah.
Well, sure. But I think essentially a lot of people think of Oregon as Portland and don't think much outside of Portland.
The population density is really in Portland. I mean, the majority of the population is in the Portland metro area.
But I was looking at the State House and State Senate, and they are not super majorities for the Democrats.
No.
Right.
So they are majorities, but they're not super majorities. Although, of course, with a Democratic governor, you can probably usually get bills through and get signed. But what does it feel? So if you're in Portland or if you're in other parts of the state, does it actually feel that sort of liberal and anything goes? And
now that I haven't been super involved in the Washington 3 race. What we have a couple of organizers that are really concentrating on that, and then we're kind of like divide and conquer, I guess, because a lot of what I do with Indivisible Oregon, which is mainly like on the data, like the super geeky free tools for communication and stuff like that, helping District 2 because they're so large and they need to kind of transcend that huge area. That's been something that us and a couple different activist groups have been brainstorming about how to best do that. And it does feel very liberal in Portland, but I will say that having spent time with Jamie McLeod-Skinner a little bit, talking about kind of the makeup of the district, looking at the statistics of OR2 demographics, and then also talking to people, indivisible groups in District 2, which there are a ton. The kind of movement in Oregon 2 and District 2 has been kind of astonishing. They have, I think, dozens of groups that kind of sprung up.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And a lot of people that actually did vote for Walden initially and have moved away from that when they have realized that he's not representing their interests. But there's been so many interesting things once you look outside of Portland. It's a whole different animal. It's unique as far as the rest of the country goes. It's just been really interesting to kind of step out and talk to members of indivisible groups who are there in Bend, which is a larger city, but Hood River and all these Medford, these towns, they just have different needs. They have different kind of things that are priorities for them that are not necessarily the priorities of Portland. And that's been a really interesting conversation to have with them about finding ways to connect.
Well, to speak to the question about the state legislature and Oregon state politics, it's kind of sad, first of all, that there are only 8 states with a Democratic governor and Democratic state legislature.
Hopefully, at least Illinois is going to switch.
I think you guys have a good chance.
Yes.
And, what happened in New Jersey this year is a really great example of what happens when how the consequences that elections have when you have a progressive governor and a Democratic legislature and how swiftly they're moving there. And Virginia, yeah. We have the typical urban-rural divide. And like Megan was saying, the concerns of rural Oregon are very specific and very localized. There's water rights issues and grazing issues and things that are completely foreign to us, in the urban areas of Portland that, I wouldn't deign to speak to. I don't understand what their issues are. We have a big Native population here. So it's such a vast state, and the rural part of the state is high desert, it's mountain, there's rainforest, there's logging communities. So there's a lot of diversity even within the rural parts of the state. And then as far as the state legislature goes, it's still pretty closely divided. And a few years ago, I worked on a campaign with Moms Demand Action to flip a key legislative seat outside of Portland in the suburbs from Republican to Democrat, because even though we had a Democratic majority by 1 or 2 votes, there is a Democrat in the state Senate. Her name is Betsy Johnson, who always votes with the Republicans. And so we needed to neutralize her vote in order to pass universal background checks on all gun sales in Oregon. And we mobilized to support a candidate named Chuck Riley in the Hillsborough area outside of Portland. And we flipped that seat. And then with Kate Brown's support, we got universal background checks on all gun sales in 2015. So it's still very close, and we can't take our majority for granted. And we can't even take Governor Kate Brown for granted. She has a pretty decent challenger this year in Newt Buehler, who's a Republican from Bend in Central Oregon, which is it's a purple city. I mean, it's trending blue, but it's still pretty purple. So, while Indivisible Oregon isn't officially supporting Kate Brown, a lot of us activists are supporting her because we cannot lose that seat.
Mm-hmm. The episode after this one, so everyone should tune in again, we're going to be talking to two candidates, two Democrats who are running for state legislature in Oregon in currently Republican seats, Mike Ellison and Shannon Souza.
The president of the Oregon State Senate, who is basically like the Mitch McConnell of the Oregon Senate, is a Democrat named Peter Courtney, and he is based in Salem, which is the state capital. That's his district. And he's very conservative, and he's very conflict averse, and he's very entrenched. He's held his seat for a really long time. And so he has become a major roadblock to a lot of progressive bills. So we tried to pass national popular vote in Oregon in the last legislative session. He would not bring it to the floor for a vote. He's held up a lot of gun reform bills. He's held up bills on, banning plastics in toys and baby bottles and things like that. So he can become a huge roadblock for bills that would fly through. They have support, but he's the gatekeeper, and he's this ornery, stubborn guy that just is intransigent and oftentimes can't be moved. So I think we would be even more of a progressive bellwether if we could get rid of Democrat Peter Courtney. But right now he's not going anywhere.
And you don't have term limits on those seats?
No, we don't have term limits. And there was some talk that he wasn't going to run again because he's not a young guy, but he decided to go for it again. And a lot of what I've heard about I don't think he has any viable challengers. And the other thing that I've heard about the Oregon legislature is that people who are big fundraisers, candidates, legislators who are big fundraisers, get the support of the party. So if Peter Courtney has so much power that he can raise a lot of money, and so nobody wants to challenge him. So I think that's a lot of what accounts for his entrenchment.
But you do have some bills that have gone through that are more progressive than a lot of the country. So you have automatic voter registration and universal vote by mail.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what that means for politics in Oregon and if it does lead to increased voter participation?
Yeah, so we do have universal vote by mail. We have automatic voter registration. You have to default. The default is that you're registered when you get a driver's license or a state issued ID. You have to opt out if you don't want to be registered. So voter registration is high and voter participation is high. We have usually among the top two voter turnout. I think us and Washington are usually neck and neck because they also have automatic voter registration and vote by mail. But that being said, it's still shocking that our turnout is not as high as you would think. It's shocking.
Well, and we had this conversation kind of within our activist circles when we were looking at the primary vote counts. Part of the interesting thing we're running into is 150,000 more people voted in this primary on May 15th than had the last midterm primary. But because we have such a high registration rate, the percentage of people who actually voted versus registered voters was smaller. So it was 38% in 2014, and it was 33 this time, but more people voted. The second thing that we're running into, especially when we're looking at the 2016 voter data, is because you're automatically registered, you don't necessarily have to choose a party. And so especially in District 2, at least 1/3 of the population is non-affiliated. So you have no party necessarily who has resources devoted to that voting block. So it's presenting an interesting challenge to kind of figure out what's going on and try to get people voting.
So universal vote, I moved to Oregon in 2000, or the very end of 99. And universal vote by mail was already in place then when I moved here. I think it passed by ballot measure. I'm not sure the history of how it came to be in Oregon, but it's great. It's amazing. You get a ballot in the mail 2 or 3 weeks before the election. You have time to sit down with it, go over it. And we have a lot of ballot measures. Oregon is a state that has, citizen initiatives and referendums and whatnot. And those can be very complicated. So to have the time to do the research at home, read through the voter's guide, do research online, whatever you need to do, it's such a luxury. And you don't have to take off work. You don't have to go stand in line. You don't have all those barriers to voting that a lot of states have, by design, obviously, to disenfranchise people. It's so incredibly easy, and I really appreciate it. In fact, in the 2000 2008, I think, presidential election, my husband and I, just for the hell of it, voted naked just because we could. We just sat on the couch and filled out our ballots naked just to make a point. Like, this is, I mean,